It's about that time when some old git stands up and starts talking about how to have a long and happy marriage. Well, I guess there are people in this room that are looking at me and they're all thinking, mate, you're the least qualified person here to talk about that. And I wouldn't disagree with them, and I wasn't going to say anything about it. But, the other day I was around this old couple's house and they've been married for over 40 years. And so it is, it was a topical thought in my head about the long and happy marriage thing. And I was thinking of asking them about it when I noticed this large frame print on their wall. And what it said was, marriage is like a game of cards. You start off with 2 hearts and a diamond, but in no time at all, you wish you had the club and the spade. So I probably shouldn't talk about long and happy marriages then, but what I did want to talk about was marriage in a broader context to marriage. Like, we've seen Stella and Selwyn get married today, and it's like, how do we see that? So on every, on every continent, in every country, in every culture, there exists this thing called marriage. And if there have been people there today from Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, Africa, or Accrington, even though they never spoke a word of English, especially the people from Accrington, they would have all known what they were seeing, because we know what marriage is. Because marriage is about being human. It's not really, like it happens in the context of church and all that stuff, but marriage is not about religion, it's not about a race, it's not about your country, it's not about your nationality. Marriage is a human thing. It exists outside of all those things that define us as people. So Stella and Selwyn, you're now married. I see you as standing shoulder to shoulder facing the world. Now you imagine if all the couples that got married in this 24-hour period that we called Sunday, imagine if all those couples could be standing shoulder to shoulder beside you, then what you'd have is you'd have a line of people from every single continent, every country, every culture, every clan standing there beside you. And that line of people would stretch from one horizon clear through to the other and beyond. That's what I think is a broader context for your marriage. But I think there's another dimension to it as well. And it's this. Whilst you're standing in that line, if it were possible that you could turn your head and look behind you and look back in time, then what you would see standing behind you would be your immediate ancestors. And behind them would be ancestors further back, and behind them would be ancestors even further back. But that line behind you doesn't just stretch to the beginning of your family, it actually stretches to the very beginning of human existence on this planet, and I see you at the front of that right now. That, I think, is the biggest context that I can come up with for your marriage. So we have this thing called marriage, but it's not a fixed thing. It changes from place to place, time to time. Like 20 years ago, you'd have been married in the church. There's none of this getting married out in paddocks with sheep and things like that. So marriage is this fluid, flexible thing that changes as and when circumstances around it change. So like recently in New Zealand, we've seen marriage, or the definition of marriage, expand to include the LGBT community. Now, if you're confused, I'm not talking about sandwiches. This has got nothing to do with a buffet, right? LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual. So like, while we're defining things, I think I should also point out to any single men that are here, especially country boys, I'm not looking at anyone, but marriage does not include a chicken, a sheep or a horse. Even if they're gay, I don't care what you might say. So now that we've clarified that, so we not only have marriage, but we also have practices around marriage. Like in some places they jump over a broomstick, all kinds of weird stuff. But have you ever heard of the dowry system? Well, what you may not know is that was invented right here in Hallswell, and it goes something like this. Some poor bugger, in this case me, says, mate, I'll give you a mob of sheep and a deaf goat if you take her off me hands. And somebody else, in this case Pete King, says, mate, throw in a few chooks, laying chooks, and she's a done deal. So you see, if you have girls, if your children are female, every time one gets married, you get poorer, right? But if you have boys, every time one gets married, you get richer. So now, I've known Pete and Cess King for a long, long time. In fact, when I first met them, they were so poor, they lived on a rubbish dump, and they had a tent with no walls and no ceiling. It was just a zip, right? But in the next 2 years, they had 17 children, all boys. I'm not making this up, right? And they married them off really, really quickly. So every time one got married, they got richer, right? Now they're down to their last few now, so no pressure, anyone, right? But if you go outside this tent, they don't just own all those sheep and all those cows and all those horses and the tractors. They actually own the grass, the sky, the trees. In fact, they own all of Horswell, all of Hunay, most of Prebleton and the ASB Bank. So if you need a loan, go and talk to them. Now, a week or so back, I was talking to a really good friend of mine, and we were talking about marriage. And she said something that surprised me. She said that marriage cheapens women. I'm looking around me and I don't see anything cheap about this at all. But I did say to her, like, well, how do you work out that marriage cheapens women? And she says, well, you know, the woman gets given away like she's a piece of furniture. And I had to admit, I have seen women that look like that. No, seriously. I said, how do you mean then? And she said, well, look, she said, one man gives the bride away to another man like he owns her, you know. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but I've never really seen it like that. I guess I've kind of seen it like the old guy nudges the bride towards the young guy and says, mate, it's your problem now, good luck. No, that's not funny. That's not funny, trust me. So I had to think about it, right? And it's like, most people don't possess their own souls. If you do possess your own soul, you know that you cannot possess anybody else's. So I don't really think it runs like that. You see, and like parents don't own their children. Now, there's other parents here, right? Parents, put your arms up. Let's see it. Okay, right. Now, imagine this scenario, parents. I'm talking to the parents now. If you're single, just play with your phones, right? So, parents, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, everybody's asleep, the child has a nightmare. In the next moment, you parents are wide awake and standing by that bed. Am I right? I am, aren't I? Yeah? Right, now, parents, imagine the same scenario. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, everybody's asleep, and you have a nightmare. Do you wake up and find your child standing by the bed? You don't, do you? No, the little buggers sleep right through it. So, I think if anything, you know, the weight falls more on the child's side there. The parents do not own the children at all. But, so I did think about this further. You know, I think, like, well, what's all this about? You know, this giving away thing. And to be honest with you, I don't really know what all that's about. Not in my heart, I don't, you know. So I thought about it like that. I thought in my heart, what is this thing about? And I think it goes something like this. It's like, at 20 past midnight, on August the 1st, 1986, at 67 Burke Street in the front bedroom, Stella Frost, you were born. I was there. In that moment, I witnessed your journey into this life. And from that moment, I knew something with such certainty and clarity, absolutely no doubt at all, and it was this. It's that going forward, that I would love, protect, cherish and nurture you. Selwyn King, if I was to give you anything, it would be this. I will give you the mantle of trust, that in your duty as a husband, that you too will love, protect, cherish and nurture my daughter. Thank you.